So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who haven't listened into the WealthTech talk from the Wealth Mosaic before, my name is Stephen Wall. I'm co-founder of the Wealth Mosaic. Welcome to another one of our webinars focused on various aspects of technology in and around the wealth management sector. Thank you for joining us. So today we're looking at the topic of cybersecurity and the threat it places on the wealth management industry. And I'm joined by four guests who I'll introduce shortly. Quick bit of administration. We're on live now for roughly an hour, so we'll be quick introductions, going through the topic. So we'll be introducing what it is that we're going to talk about. We'll look at the backdrop and the market status. We'll look at some of the challenges and opportunities perhaps that might exist in the area. And then we'll talk through elements of action, delivery, and success. It's recorded, so if you do wish to listen to it again after this live session, it will be available both on Bright Talk and on the Wealth Mosaic. You can ask questions, and we plan to answer those questions at the end. So let me not continue. I think let me introduce this, or rather ask the panelists to introduce themselves. So Nino, first, if I can come to you, can you give a quick introduction to who you are, what you do, and the firm you work for?
So I'm Nino Vang. I'm co-founder of ALT. We have a product called Distribute, and I've been a security expert also for about 20 years of my life. I advise everything from Fortune 500 companies to governments, and right now we saw a big opportunity in FinReg to establish us in the market and to help financial institutions to safeguard their companies, basically.
Nino, thank you very much. Terry, if we just go around the screen, can I ask you to introduce yourself next, please?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Stephen, for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to your members and those attending today. My name is Terry Wilson. I'm the Global Partnership Director for the Global Cyber Alliance. This is a not-for-profit that was started in 2015, ironically by using the international proceeds of crime as a seed fund, and instigated by our three founders, the District Attorney of New York, Mr. Cyrus Vance Jr., the then Commissioner of the City of London Police, and also the Centre for Internet Security, and many of you will hopefully be aware of the CIS 20 critical controls. So there are three founders. We have 35 staff roughly across the globe, with offices in Brussels, London, and New York, and recently opening an office in Singapore. We have a very impressive board that we're accountable to. We are not-for-profit, as I've said, charitable status in the US. And effectively, we don't get up every day and just decide what we're going to do. We have a strategic advisory committee made up of 55 to 60 influential government, non-government, entrepreneurs, cybersecurity experts around the world who come together twice a year, identify systemic cyber risk, and then either ask us to try and scale globally solutions that have not already been adopted, so things like DMARC in terms of email security, or come up with new solutions to an identified problem. So we currently have two programs, Internet Integrity and also Capacity and Resilience. So one at the enterprise level and one at the end user level. So we have over 160 partners that I manage at present across the globe. And our partners are actively involved in our projects. We have our business model effectively as sponsorship and altruistic donations. So we have Bloomberg, MasterCard, Craig Newmark, the Hewlett Foundation are significant contributors to our business model, but it is free to engage with Global Cyber Alliance, and we push out our solutions free in order that specifically small and medium businesses and small businesses, for example, in the wealth sector, can build their cyber resilience and their awareness at very low cost and raise that from the baseline that many organizations still have in terms of cybersecurity. So apologies for going a little bit longer than Nino, but that's who I am and my organization, and I look forward to today's vibrant debate.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Terry. Ali, to you, a quick introduction to yourself, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen. So my name is Ali Qureshi. I'm the co-founder of a company called SideDrawer. We are an API-based collaboration platform that's completely infrastructure agnostic. We help financial advisors, wealth managers, and enterprises improve the collaboration between their internal users and external parties. So to give you a very simple use case, you have a financial planner that is engaging with a client, as well as their client's accountant, lawyer, family member, executor, and so on. So all of that sensitive documentation that has to be collected and shared between all those parties, we provide a completely infrastructure agnostic solution for that can be either use our SaaS product that we have in market, or use our APIs to custom design the workflows that you prefer.
Great, thank you, Ali. And finally, Dave, a quick introduction to yourself, please. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is David Atkinson. I'm the founder and CEO of an AI cybersecurity company called SenseOn, headquartered here in London. Really, SenseOn exists to build the security architecture of the future. I founded the company to answer the sort of elephant in the room, why we keep getting hacked after billions of dollars of investment. And for some of our technical breakthroughs, we've just been named a World Economic Forum Technology Pioneer. So again, likewise, looking forward to the debate and the discussion today. And again, thanks for the invite.
Thank you all. And thank you for that quick introduction to you each. So interesting point, Dave. I mean, why does the industry keep getting attacked? So I wonder, Terry, can we just quickly turn to you and can you give us any backdrop in terms of the numbers, some of the threats, sort of modern picture of what the cybersecurity risk is to either the wealth management industry or more generally the financial services industry? Can you tell us what's going on?
Yeah, we'll all have our own experiences, so I'm looking forward to hearing other people's views as well on this. And it would be lovely if there is the opportunity for some interaction with your audience to either challenge what we're saying or to endorse what we're saying, because it's nice to know that we're all on the same page in terms of the threat picture and the remedial action that can be taken. But my background was in law enforcement, and I headed up the national remit for investigations and global cyber attacks that were impacting the UK. And the financial sector was always a target for the obvious reasons. It's where the money is, but it's also there's personal information, which is now a commodity that is bought and sold. So the financial sector has also always been a target. Now, in the past, working with the financial sector, and I set up an initial initiative called the Virtual Task Force, which is now developed into the Cyber Defence Alliance. But through that initiative, we managed to, and it's one of the takeaways for today, by working together, sharing information, seeing actually not having cybersecurity experts tell you what's going on, but hearing it from your peers, hearing it from other businesses and organizations within your sector, you can build up that risk picture. And through working in that initiative, we arrested over 500 cyber criminals over 4 years, and significant players in countries that you would not expect us to actually have success. And importantly, and just to set the picture, we achieved 1.01 billion financial harm reduction to the UK, largely to the financial sector, and that was independently assessed by the London School of Economics. So when you're talking about that sort of harm reduction, it shows the amount of wealth that is actually being targeted and is at risk through cyber adversaries. But importantly for the wealth sector, which I would suggest is probably more of a niche sector than the wider financial sector, I think it's, from my experience, it's harder. I don't want to put anyone into a false sense of security here, but I think it's harder to attack sort of the high wealth sector, because they're not transacting in the normal way using banking portals, etc., where cyber adversaries are targeting. But at the same time, where it may be harder to attack, it's easier and more of a motivation to attack the smaller high wealth sector because of the personal information that's available, the opportunities to conduct ransomware, knowing that most likely there is the money to actually pay the ransom. So they go for the low-hanging fruit, and if they can get finance, which on some cases, and there are stated cases which hopefully will come out today, where the wealth management sector has been targeted, largely through business email compromise. So I think Ali and someone else may talk more detail about that. But the significant threats that we're seeing in the wealth management sector are, I would say, number one is business email compromise, targeting those at the top of the organization. Ransomware is a target, and it's getting more aggressive. So a case recently I heard of, which was in your sector, where they actually managed to intercept a communication from the wealth manager to the client and took photographs via the client's webcam, and then used that in an aggressive manner to put pressure on the wealth management organization because the reputation was at risk. Effectively, through a business email compromise, a client was being sent photographs of them at their own laptop talking or engaging with their wealth manager. That's a huge issue in terms of reputation from a client's perspective, and can do damage to that organization, but also the trust in the sector as a whole. So I think the overall, the threats are there, but also, if I could end my little segment here on saying, I think when I started and we engaged three or 4 years ago, Stephen, I think the feedback that I got from your seminars was that they were kind of old institutions. Many had been part of acquisitions, and there was legacy networks in place, and it was all too hard to shore up the cybersecurity. And what I have seen, and various reports, including the great work that you've done at the Wealth Mosaic and also PIMFA, for example, I think over the last 3 years, the wealth management sector has woken up to cybersecurity and see it as a positive promotional, we're looking after our clients, and we're putting strategies in place. And I think there's been a huge amount of progress over the last 3 years, but with a lot more to do.
Fantastic, Terry. Thank you. Ali, are you largely in agreement with that? Have you got anything to add in terms of some of the threat metrics or the focus areas that wealth managers should be thinking about?
100%. I think Terry is completely bang on with the thesis there and what we're experiencing. So our client base who are using our SaaS product are basically finding that from an end client perspective, their clients are becoming very nervous about sharing very sensitive information via email, either as attachments or as file sharing links. And that is a big concern that's emerging, because that is traditionally how the entire industry is operated. So if you take PCI's governance requirements for a credit card industry, you're not really allowed to send a credit card number via email, right? Because that can be taken and then used for a transaction. So it's obvious there, but why is it not obvious that I can't send you my tax statements, my pay stub, my social insurance number, and so on? So that's the concern that is starting to emerge in a pretty significant manner right now. And we're finding that, and to Terry's point, actually, it validates that the wealth manager is using cybersecurity as a selling point for their own practice. So a lot of firms are saying that, look, I'm not going to use email. You have to use my my SideDrawer application and come into me that way. It's fully branded. It's obviously very secure, and there's aspects of it that allow greater engagement between family members, other professionals, as well as that. But it allows all of those parties to come together into one platform and conduct the business that they need to. So we are definitely finding that. And if you look at the SEC, I think within the last 2 months, just fined 3 firms a pretty hefty amount because somebody had hacked into one of the email boxes, and had access to the inbox, sent items, draft items, deleted folders of that particular mailbox. And you can imagine how much sensitive client information is sitting in those inboxes or in the entire mailbox. So, and because there's no way to actually track what was accessed and what wasn't, you have to notify every client that appears in that particular mailbox. And that goes back to Terry's point about the reputational risk that you have from that. So I think it's definitely coming into the forefront for a lot of folks, and clients are also starting to demand it.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. Nino, I know we talked a little bit earlier about some of the things that you do. Do you have anything else to add here in terms of what the threat areas are, the trends that you see, and whether wealth management is perhaps different or just similar to other industries?
No, I mostly agree with everything, and one of the things we normally are good at are the platforms in between the client and the office. But what we are not good at is when we start using the email, and not just the email, but in general, having these big databases of clients that are unprotected as well. Like if you see the JP Morgan hack, when 80 million email addresses were hacked, there was basically two hackers that just wanted email addresses to promote fake, like pump and dump stocks, penny stocks. So that's how silly it becomes, and that's how easy it is to hack in some of these systems. So I would do everything I can to eliminate the email between the client and you. And then secondly, if you can't use emails, you should use services that gives you secure, immutable access, where you can send files, either immutable files or files that need to be protected to the public. Just because everybody uses email, it's a huge target to attack. It's normally very simple, and probably a lot of people probably don't even know that anyone can use anyone's email to send an email today. It's going to be unsigned email, but no one checks if an email is signed or not. So that's just one of the attack points. But I totally agree. It's a big threat right now, in addition to the other threats.
Great, thank you, Nino. Dave, I wonder if we just look across what's going on in the world that we live in now. We've had COVID, we've had increased digitalization of the industry. Terry touched upon legacy technology and maybe not a laziness, but a resistance to doing certain things to protect cybersecurity because it was complicated, it's hard, it's expensive. Where do you see the market now? I mean, has the threat changed? Has the threat grown in terms of the number of attacks? And is wealth management a special case, or is it a laggard? Is it where is it in terms of its progress in facing up to this issue?
Yeah, I always like to look at the strategic trends that are influencing the sector, and then our cybersecurity as a whole, and then come down to the individual sector and see how that applies. I think in relation to the threat, there is 4 particular areas where they're advancing at a great pace. I think just in terms of knowledge, nowadays it's just a lot easier to get knowledge and how to hack into things than perhaps when, I learned how to hack. In terms of skills, also, it's a lot easier to practice hacking than it was, previously when I was growing up. I'd have to set up a lab of my own and, install the software and hardware I would have bought. Now I can open up a tab in a web browser and actually begin hacking in quite complex advanced environments. Tooling, you can download very advanced tooling from places like GitHub nowadays, and that really lowers the barrier entry to the skills that you actually need to have to hack. And then organization, the cyber criminal groups in particular are organizing themselves in quite innovative ways. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it, but they are beginning to deliver their capabilities that require specialist knowledge to set up as a service to allow our less skilled affiliates to hack on their behalf. And this is important because I know Terry said, hey, financial services are targeted, and obviously that very famous quote from Willie Sutton, the great US bank robber, hey, why did you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Well, actually what the advent of cryptocurrency has enabled from a threat point of view is a way to get paid pretty non-attributably from anyone, And so when you combine this ability to get paid through cryptocurrency from anyone, i.e. I don't have to go and attack, HSBC or Barclays and the instrumentation of the financial services sector to transfer money from one account to my account. I can actually get anyone to pay me over the internet in a pretty safe way now. Everyone becomes a victim, So when it comes to threat, those are like the 4 key areas that are driving us and are a real concern, I think. Now, just 2 more factors. So that's looking at the external factor. I think internal factors, just 2 quick points. Firstly, complexity, okay? We adopt technology at a pace we've never seen before. Software as a service, infrastructure, moving to the cloud, digitalization. And in specific, in my experience of working with wealth management firms that tend to use outsourced IT providers, undoubtedly they'll be using things like Office 365, you wouldn't believe the number of incidents we respond to that are down to misconfigured Office 365, even though you think you've got two-factor authentication, there's ways of bypassing it. So the average enterprise today, 110 applications is what they use. So think about that complexity in terms of defending it. And then the last point, also an internal point, is the sheer amount of data that's being produced. We're talking about hackers. If I'm a hacker, there's more data for me to grab. If I'm after specific data, there's more data for me to hide in. And as just to set this in context to the listener's mind, it's estimated 73 zettabytes worth of data will be produced in 2021. If 1 grain of rice was equal to 1 byte, then 1 zettabyte would completely fill the Pacific Ocean full of rice. So that gives you an idea of the sheer amount of data being produced. So to answer your question, Stephen, yeah, absolutely, the threat is advancing at huge paces, and there's a number of key factors, but also internally, there's a number of key factors to consider as well.
I don't know where to start now. I mean, that's it's quite complex and scary stuff, isn't it? I wonder, Ali, given what you mentioned earlier, I mean, so how have wealth managers typically responded to this? I mean, and have they changed? Have all of these dynamics in the market made them wake up? Were they kind of lazy before, or were they? What was the situation, and where are they now? Have they evolved?
So I think that what we're finding is there's a greater awareness. There's a greater awareness of the problem. It's also being raised because of what you're seeing every day in the news, and also what you're hearing from clients. So there's that. There's an understanding that there's a need to take some sort of an action. I would say that in a lot of situations where it falls under compliance, where you do it as a preventative source, and once you get slapped on the wrist, that's when you're definitely going to take action. But not knowing when you should take that action is probably what a lot of folks have to sort of map out into their business plan, right? So there's a process where they have to do an assessment, and I think it's definitely increasing in the priority list for a lot of wealth managers. I would say it's not the number one priority, is what everyone's hoping to get to for the sake of the clients and the sake of their businesses. But we definitely know that if it was sort of tier 3, it's now tier 2, flirting with tier 1, and maybe somewhere in between tier 1, but it's not number 1. And I think that's something that we're starting to see as more of these incidents take place, as more of the stats start to go in that favor. I think something like misdirected email, for example, is the number 1 source of data breaches at financial institutions, right? And I believe there's a study that was done that said in an enterprise with more than 1,000 employees, it happens about twice a day, two times a day, that you have a misdirected email resulting in a data breach. So there's all these things that have to factor in. There has to be a cost that's associated with regulatory fines. So we're starting to see some of that become a response from the regulators, and that's driving change. So I think it's becoming a priority, but it's not 100% there yet.
Going a little bit further, I wonder, I mean, Dave mentioned a lot of outsourcing. Obviously, you're all, or 3 of you at least, are technology providers to the industry, and you're talking about cybersecurity. So I'm wondering to what extent the industry is using you to solve its problem, as opposed, so it's outsourcing the problem to you, or are they taking control of it themselves? Does that make sense? I mean, are they relying on you, or are they building?
I think definitely for the variety of customers, if you take an enterprise client where they already have significant teams of cybersecurity professionals and consultants who are advising them on a regular basis, they've already got a proven stack that they can use and utilize, right? That they're comfortable with. So as a third-party vendor to them, our solution, being API first and infrastructure agnostic, works because it allows to sit behind their existing infrastructure that they're already comfortable with. So from that perspective, there's ease there. So they don't have to do the same level of vendor assessments that they would normally have to do for something that's outside of their perimeter. But for a smaller wealth manager that's using our SaaS product, definitely they're outsourcing that on us. So we have to make sure that we have SOC compliance. We have to make sure that we're following protocols that are industry standard, better than industry standard. And that just comes down to how we operate as a business. So you're absolutely right. I think for smaller firms, it'll be very hard for them to stay on top of all of the things, as I think David had mentioned earlier in a prior one, that misconfiguration and things like that are also issues that you have to be careful of. And so those are very difficult for smaller firms to stay on top of. So they definitely will be relying on outsourced support.
Yep. And Nino, if we think about some of your interactions with firms, do you see wealth managers as sort of sophisticated participants in understanding what cybersecurity is? I mean, what is their knowledge level, and how does that sort of impact how you engage with them?
So they normally see it as something they basically just have to do, just have to comply with. And it's, let's be honest, cybersecurity isn't the funniest thing in the world. And they are normally very good at what they do, and they don't want to spend too much time thinking about cybersecurity. And a lot of times it's not the technology that's the reason they get hacked. It's the way they use it, is the policies and the practices of the policies that has the biggest impact. So that's why we're talking about outsourcing and basically moving that risk. In a lot of cases, in the financial sector, outsourcing is actually increasing the security, because you are forcing another company that specializes in it to solve that smaller task. So, for example, for us, where it's documents to clients, we are only working with documents to clients. We're not working with emails. We're not working with their customer service. We're not working with their products, with their cards, transactions. We are only focusing on documents, and automatically we're going to be better on that than a regular IT supplier of them. So they normally don't have a lot of knowledge about it, and often that's some of the that's some of the problem. But I don't either see it to educate the whole financial industry into using anti-hacking tools and practicing the best policies. I rather think it's a leadership decision to make sure that all the loops are closed and the processes are done in such a way where security is a part of the methods, part of the total cycle.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, Terry, I think in previous conversations, I mean, this actually mirrors with, I think, every technology conversation we have at the Wealth Mosaic. So there's a lot of tech out there, and it can be absolutely fantastic or not, but it often comes down to the human and the leadership and the culture and different elements. So I don't know whether you can give us any insights and sort of best practice as to how to mirror the human side with the technology side, and what needs to be done from the wealth manager's perspective to make sure that behaviors are followed and practices are followed and policies are followed. Are there any learnings?
Well, it is, and you just hit the nail on the head, is humanizing cybersecurity, because you can get bogged down in the acronyms and the technical knowledge, and you'll get those that walk away from it because they don't understand it. And it's really important at board level that they do understand. There's a couple of comments I just want to follow up on in terms of outsourcing. I think outsourcing is good, but I have to say, I've also seen a number of organizations who have outsourced and then become victim of cybercrime and said, how's this happened? We're outsourcing, we're paying you. And then they've actually asked the question, what have we actually got? And it turns out that they've been given a package based upon the budget that they've had in terms to outsource for their cybersecurity, but they haven't actually gone into the weeds and the detail of what are you providing and what are the risks that it's mitigating. So it's kind of, can you build me a house? And you haven't had any input into what the house looks like or its energy or anything. You've just said, build me a house, and they've come in with cybersecurity solutions. So I think it's really important to understand what you have, and at board level, understand, although you're outsourcing, what are you paying for? And is it, and if I was a CEO or chair of a board, I would want to see the risk that has been identified, and I'd want to see the solution that we were actually paying for, and correlate the two. Is what we're paying for mitigating the risks that have been identified to my organization and the risks that have been identified to this sector? And from an individual wealth management, there's this old saying, isn't there, that in terms of law, ignorance is no excuse in the eye of the law. And yes, wealth managers, I think, are becoming more aware of cybersecurity, because I think they are starting to realize that, in terms of fines, client relationship, and confidentiality, they have to know about cybersecurity. And again, using that term, ignorance is no excuse. So you can't be blasé when you're communicating with a client and potentially somebody eavesdropping on that or getting access to that information, because after the data breach has happened, it's too late, and you should be actually reassuring your client that you've taken the necessary steps in order to protect those communications and protect those transactions with that client. So for me, I agree. I think David that said it. It's all about having a proper InfoSec policy and knowing who owns it. The amount of organizations, when you ask who owns the InfoSec policy, no one knows. Having your policies in place, ensuring there's compliance, having strict access control, having awareness and training, which hasn't come up yet. I think there's an obligation on organizations and this is where, if you're a big enough organization, you've got an HR department. No one mentions HR in terms of cybersecurity, or the legal team or legal advisors in terms of cybersecurity. But if you're, first of all, we haven't touched upon yet sort of the inside agent. We're talking about the technology, but in the financial sector, there are inside agents who are deliberately being recruited in order to compromise an organization. And this is huge throughout the financial sector. It's a significant problem. And I'm not aware how big it is in the smaller wealth management sector, but I can imagine that it's a growing problem. But HR have the responsibility in terms of recruitment and in terms of training and awareness of staff. And there is that duty of care for the employees of an organization in order to provide that. In terms of ransomware, who do you go to when you're going to ask, are we going to pay this ransom? It's your legal team that are going to say yes or no. And if they don't understand cybersecurity and the impact it can have on an organization, how are you going to get an immediate response or a considered response? So for me, cybersecurity is not, to do with a CTO or a CISO or an IT manager in an organization. It's a board issue. It should be an agenda item, not just in the wealth management sector, but in all sectors. And it should include all aspects of an organization, and they should own it. More often or not, it's left to the individual employee. And a lot of employees shouldn't be put in a position where they could inadvertently put an organization at risk through that lack of awareness, training, etc. You've got to do things at that sort of enterprise level to protect your employees and protect your organizations, and then look at the end user who's interacting on the web on a daily basis, whether it be via email or other means.
Thank you, Terry. Dave, can we pick up on that? So where is, picking up on what Terry's mentioned, and also I think relates back to the configuration issue that you said you were brought in for frequently earlier. So it sounds like there's confusion. So where is InfoSec? Where should it be owned? And how does an organization put InfoSec culturally across all of the elements that need to be aware of it?
Yeah, I really didn't mean to spark a debate out on the benefits or risks of outsourcing. I guess what I was trying to make is, you're buying one thing, but there are secondary and tertiary effects of doing that. You are receiving technology as a service. That's great, but as hackers, we live to subvert, and misappropriate technology for reasons that you maybe couldn't predict. So I'm not saying the benefits or risks otherwise are worth it or not. I'm just saying it's a common theme that we sometimes get called in to help with. I think to answer your question, Stephen, it really is led from the top, like Terry said, with regards to the board, and it's not just technology, right? I think as Nino pointed out, it's process, and then it's people, right? It's really building it into your culture. And as you get down into maybe certainly the smaller wealth management firms that we've dealt with, where we were sort of tied to the outsourcing debate, there is a problem, right? Where depending on which study you look at, there's around about 3 to 4 million empty cybersecurity jobs out there, and so actually the best option here is actually probably outsourcing some sort of security partnership to someone, to save you trying to go through the difficulties of recruiting someone internally for the smaller firms at least. But I think it's regardless of where you sit in the hierarchy of organization, I always have the utmost respect for, you see chief information security officers, sometimes of very large organizations on LinkedIn, posting when they've fallen for a phishing email. And a phishing email is obviously a similar sort of thing to what we've been talking about, this business email compromise, just to explain what everyone's talking about. So it's where you're essentially hooked into clicking on a link or opening up a malicious document that then allows an attacker to control your computer. And having that culture of being open and transparent about falling for those things, I think really then encourages anyone in the business to put their hand up when actually, even if they're not 100% sure, you always want this culture of sort of like raising your hand and saying, hey, I think this was a little bit dodgy actually now looking at it, you know? And so it all begins at the top, basically, culturally. I think it is what I find the best examples to be in really establishing a culture of security.
I wonder, Ali, can we talk about cybersecurity and wealth management as an opportunity for wealth managers? So it's not just a risk, it's not just something that they have to think about to avoid a regulatory issue or a reputational issue, but they can actually use it as a marketing tool to win clients, win advisors, grow their business. Is that possible?
100%. We actually think it is a differentiator for your value proposition, because if you think about the insurance product that protects your digital identity, I think it's it's sold for $29.99 US a month or $24.99, whatever the price is. That's one of the fastest growing insurance products out there, right? To protect your digital identity from digital fraud and so on. So if you think about what you're doing as a wealth manager, you're ensuring that you are taking care of your finances. So there's a holistic financial planning that goes into there, but your digital identity is part of that, and it has ramifications through multiple planning assessments that you would do for an individual. So I do think that using that as a way to show how careful you are, what processes you've put in place, what products and services you're using to safeguard your client information, because custody is you're taking physical custody of cash and so on, but you're also taking custody of information from clients and that data. And so if you're positioning yourself as somebody who's promoting that in a careful manner, I think you will definitely differentiate yourself. We have gotten feedback from our SaaS users that when they meet with a client and they say, all right, we're going to onboard you, and the client's thinking, okay, I'm going to have to send you my statements, etc. They say, wait, I'm going to send you an invite right now, and where you can use this platform to do everything. They've actually seen clients convert faster because they realize that this advisor cares about my information, my data, and how I communicate and collaborate with other people. So we definitely think it's a differentiator. We're seeing it in practice, and I think used broadly along with a whole other suite of products, then definitely can make a big difference.
Just to almost play devil's advocate, while I agree with you, I wonder, thinking back to something Dave said earlier, if you put your hand up as being fantastically bulletproof on the cybersecurity front, given the way hackers think, are you therefore asking for trouble? Are you basically saying, come and have a go?
So I think it's one of those where you have to play it under the radar, right? You have to position yourself as adding value and being able to be secure. But when you get pen test results, you don't blast it out there and saying, oh, we got an A+ or whatever the case is, right? You just basically have to take the precautionary steps and make sure that it's there. And it gives a comfort level to the end client knowing that they're dealing with somebody who actually recognizes this as an issue, right? There's a bit of emotional feeling in this whole thing that you want to feel like you're taken care of, right?
Understood. Thank you. Time is flying by. We've got 20 minutes, and there's a massive amount we could go into here. So, Nino, if we just sort of look at action, delivery, and success. If I'm a wealth manager and I want to start tackling cybersecurity, are there sort of key elements that you would advise I really need to consider and deliver upon to put myself in a position where I am in a good place? Just some general rules.
So going back to what Ali said, we're not just taking custody of your money, we're also taking custody of information. So the same way you sit down and you risk assess the money and the transactions, do the same thing with the data. Where does it go into? How does it come in? how do you safeguard it, and not just safeguard it on storage, but on storage, on transport, and on processing, all these 3 steps. Make sure that the data is taken care of as good as the money. When you identify the path the data takes, then you can start drilling into the applications, drilling into the processes, and making sure that's an audit on top of it that makes sure it's followed all along the way. The same as you do all your other ISOs, do the same thing with the data of the clients.
Fantastic, Nina. Thank you, Dave. Can I ask you the same question? So, in building a modern cyber secure wealth management business, what are those building blocks and those processes that should be in place? So Nina's touched on data. Are there others?
Yeah, I would actually come back to Ali's point as well. And your question to Ali saying, well, hey, aren't I just making myself a target? I think, there is an aspect, certainly with this affiliate model of ransomware gangs, of where they're just picking off the lowest hanging fruit. So there is an aspect of, hey, I don't have to outrun the bear, I only have to run faster than you, So there is that aspect. And so then that begs the question, which leads us on nicely to what you just asked, Stephen, is what are the basics? Well, when we get responded to help people out when they've been hacked, there's 3 common ways that attackers get in. Firstly, emails. And we've already talked a little about that, business email compromise. So everyone should have their hackles up when looking at emails or seeing emails from strangers with links and documents on it. Second one is weak passwords. Okay, so get a password manager, use unique passwords, and then 2-factor authentication on any external application or internal application. And then the third main way that people get hacked is misconfigured remote access, to remotely access resources in the office if you're all working from home. So those are the 3 big areas. If you take care of those 3 areas, and the one bit of advice I always give is get a password manager, enable multi-factor authentication and everything, and continuously monitor your environment, then you're not going to go too far wrong.
Quick follow-up question there, if I may. Obviously, a lot of wealth managers are small businesses. They might not have the skills internally to manage this, and they might find it overwhelming. I mean, I think when I look at sort of Google admin and I think of all these things I'm supposed to do to manage setting up an email account or a cloud storage or whatever, it's like, it's overwhelming. It's tough if you don't know what you're doing. So what's the route forward then? Is there okay, you must do this in addition? Is it, do you work with an external expert?
No, I think always ask, I think like an expert. I think bringing those in just for like a very short time, because it's a bit like Pareto's principle. You can do a lot with just like dealing with the sort of 20%, if that makes sense. So I think and what I would say is, it's much easier than it used to be to sort of be able to get this visibility and monitoring across your estate. As much, like I say, you do like those top 3 things, you're going to be dealing with a majority of the threat. And I think, I come from a government background, and so we always ask what is, what's proportionate and necessary, in relation to the risk. And so I think taking that proportionate mindset to the risk is important to understand. So yeah, absolutely. I would back up your comments, Stephen, to say just bring an expert in, a day's worth of review, and probably get some pretty big measures that could go a long way.
Ali, coming back to you, I mean, what are the definite no-nos here? Are there certain things so we talked a little bit about the things you should do. Are there obvious things that you shouldn't do from a technology perspective?
I think I think Terry brought up this point earlier, that when you're selecting a vendor or you're looking for a solution, you have to try to check off as many boxes as you can and know exactly what risks are being covered off by that particular solution, and how much risk that particular data point was for your business, right? So I think it's very important to understand holistically what you're actually looking for, and really understand the risk and exposure that you have. So selecting a vendor based on that is very important. The way that we approach it to our clients is when you sell a solution that is strictly to solve a cybersecurity or a compliance problem, the adoption is going to be low, right? Because there's no reason to necessarily go just to that solution to do the transaction or activity, whatever. You have to kind of check it off. But if you can build in workflows, engagement, and also additional benefits to using it. So for example, when using our product, we found that we can reduce about 40% of the admin time that's associated with document management for a wealth manager. That's a material amount of time saving. So the security is a huge benefit, but also the administration time saving is a significant benefit. So if you can check off a number of things like that, then I think that's important to do. And that's part of the assessment that needs to be done, because you can't just find a solution, have it be a silo, and then doesn't get utilized or applied in your business. Going back to the points that Nino and David made about process and people are so important. And this is your frontline defense. So you have to arm them with something that they're actually going to utilize. So find other ways to get them to utilize it other than just the cybersecurity angle.
Yeah, Nino, I think this probably comes nicely to you, because that's also true for ALT, right? Is that you've got a broader set of reasons for the wealth manager or other firms to engage with the product other than your cybersecurity principles and the capabilities.
Yes, and we try to also, going back to that, like when you do go through all these checkboxes and try to dig down as much as possible, like where is the data stored, how does it getting processed. For example, we are using a public network called Hedera. That network is not ran by Azure or Google Cloud or Amazon. It's not one company running it. We're actually using 39 Fortune 500 companies to each run a node in a distributed network. This makes it super resilient. So even if 10 of these Fortune 500 companies will go rogue, the data is still there, immutable and verified. So try to dig into the process and check, as far as you can go, where is it stored? Going back to that process and checking end to end, where does it come in, where does it go out, and how is it getting processed? But otherwise, yeah, I agree with the rest of the points.
Thank you, Nino.
Can I make a point, Stephen? Sorry.
Absolutely. I was going to come to you with a question, but absolutely, go for it.
Yeah, I was feeling left out. No, I'm only joking. No, I want to just pick up on the point. Obviously, we just talked about Fortune 500 companies, etc. But going back to your previous point, where some of your wealth management organizations are quite small and they lack awareness, etc. It is starting at that baseline and not being frightened to ask the questions. So I do think that the cybersecurity industry is excellent at identifying the problems and telling organizations like members of your sector what they should do. But I don't think they're as good as telling organizations how to do it and where to go. So the feedback from my partners globally are, I've heard all this great advice and best practice, but then I go on the World Wide Web and I've just got this deluge of organizations and solutions. Every solution is better than the next solution. And they're all varying price ranges, and I've no idea what I should choose that actually suits me, is bespoke to my organization, which is where, I would say, I think David mentioned earlier that it is worthwhile getting a consultant in for a day before you choose, so that you can have that risk assessment and hopefully you're getting the best advice as to what and where you should go. And I do think that for the smaller ones only, and I'm taking this down to base level, for the smaller organizations, even just in the UK, we've got Cyber Essentials. I know your audience is global today, but even just asking yourselves those basic questions on the questionnaire of Cyber Essentials starts to raise your own awareness and gives you an idea where you are in the cybersecurity posture. And it's why actually, if I'm allowed to say it, Virgin Money, who's one of our partners, suggested that we develop a cybersecurity toolkit for small business, which we're now calling Flex, and we can adapt to various sectors. And again, it's not in competition with the organizations that are presenting here today. We're a not-for-profit, we push it out free, but for the small organizations and getting to the how do you do this and where do you go, the offer from us to your members is we would do, and hopefully with the fellow panelists do a webinar on how you actually deploy basic solutions that get you up to that baseline. And then when you build your awareness around cybersecurity, you can go for the more the subscribed or subscription solutions or the paid for solutions that are more complex and will provide you with more in-depth security. But it's getting, I think there's so many organizations who aren't even on that base level cybersecurity resilience platform at present that we need to try and help in order to enhance the reputation of the sector that they're taking cybersecurity. And I totally agree. I mean, our toolkit, which is free, I mean, it's all about everything that David said. So it's beyond simple passwords, you know, password and two-factor authentication, still a huge problem. The first question, if I was a hacker, I would want to ask anyone is, what's the name of your dog? You know, it just seems to be a password that is just out there. But, you know, preventing phishing and malware, backup and recover, the amount of organizations that don't have backups or their backups are connected to their mainframe, and therefore it's not actually a backup at all. So when you get access to it, you're getting access to the backup, and we're seeing that numerous cases now in ransomware where they're actually encrypting the backup as well. Know what you have. Still, a number of organizations do not know, and wealth managers will be the same, who has what device, who's connected to the internet, what software are they using. Patch management is just virtually non-existent. So all of these are risks that are basic awareness that wouldn't take a wealth manager long to understand. And again, coming back to that point, I actually think cybersecurity should be part of your marketing strategy. And it's something, if I was going to invest with a wealth manager, I'd be asking the question, not because I'm involved in the industry, but because of the importance of my identity and my wealth, that I've worked hard to protect both. I would go with the organization who I didn't need to even ask the question. I would want them to tell me, this is how I'm going to look after your wealth, but this is also how I'm going to look after you and your family from that compromise. And also, I would be wanting, if I was the board, to understand that that wealth manager was also protecting the reputation and the security of the organization they worked for. So there's a number of different facets here in order to cybersecurity, and it's not this negative thing. And I think we can fall into the trap of constantly identifying the risks, which is important to do. But for me, it's about promoting it as part of your wealth management package. And therefore, you're protecting your organization. First of all, you're protecting yourself, the individual. You're protecting the team that you work in. You're protecting the organization, and you're protecting your clients and customers.
Yeah, no, thank you, Terry. I mean, it's a hugely interesting world, isn't it? Because we've got all of these changing technologies, such complexity of the technology market. I mean, we speak to wealth managers all the time about what to choose. They're overwhelmed. Some are kind of almost tired of hearing about technology because there's so much stuff out there now, and it is a challenge to their business. Also, from the client perspective, I don't know whether I've ever heard of a client who's asked a wealth manager to tell them about their cybersecurity policies or principles, but it is true that it's relevant because it's not just about the money in the bank. It's about data. It's about reputation. It's about family. I was going to ask you a question about how do you determine how a client behaves in terms of being cyber aware, because I'm, having spoken before, Terry, on previous things, it is a risk, but we don't have the time here. So we've got 5 minutes left, and so not to distract it with all of those other areas which we could definitely get into. Can I ask sort of each of you just to summarize, what the main threat is and what the main action points are that you would recommend for wealth managers to move forward. So Dave, can we start with you? Obviously, you might be repeating what you've already said, so I apologize for that. But
no, none at all. I think don't underestimate the risk. You hold very sensitive information that is very important to like the core of your business, that could really seriously damage your reputation. So run faster than the other person to get away from the bar is one message I'll leave you with. And then that's to do with the threat, and then what to do. Well, actually, you can make a very, very far distance very quickly with doing the basics: password manager, multi-factor authentication, and continuous logging and monitoring.
Fantastic, thank you. Nino, can I ask you for the same conclusion points?
Yeah, so if you look at all of the big hacks, it has not been that the administrator did something wrong, it's always the poor little employee that left a terminal on or used the dog's name as a password. So, repeating what Dave said, the passwords are probably number one. Number two is the two-factor. Two-factor will probably eliminate 50% of the entry points. And then, keep everything updated. Make sure you have a policy all the way down to the system admins to make sure everything is up to date all the time. Monitor things. Nowadays, we have great AI monitoring that will basically see patterns we don't normally, recognize ourselves. AIs are better than us looking at those patterns. So the good thing is AI will work 24/7 and look at it 24/7. Normally, hacks happen on bank holidays or something like that when you have 3-4 days off, so they have time to escape and to cover their trails. So yeah, in addition to password manager, good passwords, I would say keep your systems updated and make sure you do a proper assessment of your data flow.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nino. Ali, same question to you, please, a summary points.
For sure. And to build on both what Nino and David said, it's not just the end client, but also the other individuals that you work with. So it has to be able to incorporate the family members, the other professionals, and have a process that is fully covering the entire network of the individuals that you interact with when it comes to dealing with that client. And so that's, I think, very important because it's the weakest link, I guess, that's going to have the impact on your business, right? And that phishing email or business email compromise can come from any particular source. So that's what you have to be careful of, right?
Fantastic, thank you. Terry, I took note of the request for the webinar, so don't worry, duly noted. But otherwise, concluding points from you, please.
Yeah, I just think, to end on a positive note, do what you do well, and the wealth management sector manages risk. They manage risk every day in terms of the clients and the wealth, and just transfer that skill into the engagement or the relationship with clients and customers, and manage the risk around communication, etc. But on a more strategic note, I think the points are to make sure that you've got policies in place in terms of cybersecurity and that they are publicized and known. I think, cybersecurity is such a dry issue, and I actually hate cybersecurity. I prefer the word cyber safety, because it's the safety of yourself, your organization, your wealth. Cybersecurity, you draw up this picture of somebody standing in a uniform guarding something, whereas cyber safety, it's about the safety of you, your organization, your client, etc. So I think the policies, you can make the awareness fun. So you can have a day of, I don't know what training you currently do in terms of developing your skills as a wealth manager, but you could have desktop scenarios. I've seen one produced by the University of Bristol, which is Lego, and managers are given $100,000 budget to spend on cybersecurity. So it's basic, but it raises that awareness and actually makes you think in another way instead of being lectured to. So and also internal testing. So testing of your systems. I think Ali mentioned, doing penetration testing. I'm not sure how many organizations in the wealth management sector are actually testing or doing pen testing of their systems. And also, phishing exercises. Have scenarios, even during Cyber Awareness Month or twice a year, do an exercise and then have an assessment of how many staff have fallen victim to an internal phishing campaign that you've created, and then see how many the second time round, because you'll identify training and learning opportunities for staff, and it should give you an assessment of whether your training and awareness is working or not. And if 100% of your staff are falling victim to an internal phishing campaign, I would be extremely worried.
Well, I spoke to one wealth manager once, and they said it was however much training they did, there was always 4 out of 100 who always fell for it. So hopefully that's not true. Well, gentlemen, thank you for the time. Much appreciated. Thanks for the insights. For those listening in, thank you for listening in. The session has been recorded, so it is available to listen to in a couple of hours on BrightTalk, and soon also on the Wealth Mosaic. So Terry, Nino, Dave, and Ali, thank you much appreciated. And well, as Terry mentioned, let's try and get some more webinars sorted in the near future on this topic. So thank you again, and we will speak again soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.